knew they shouldn't have invited me today. West Palm Beach have had a problem. Anyway, Ed and I first joined up in the spring of 1976 when we reported to the Manned Spacecraft Center as members of the latest group of astronauts. I'm not sure the story behind it, but we soon became the original 19. Ed and I spent some very intimate times together because we rented an apartment down in League City, and actually it was a 3-bedroom apartment, and while we were waiting for our families to make the move. The third fellow with us, 3 of us in this apartment, was TK, or Ken Mattingly. We marveled as we looked at how he survived on about 5 hours sleep a night and lived pretty much on cheese, peanut butter, and crackers. I met a lady earlier that was Ed's housekeeper, and I can tell you we sure could have used her help during that period. Just after a month, Ed and I both moved out as our families joined us in Houston. Ed was the most senior member of our original 19 group, and he was appointed as the leader to kind of nursemaid us and keep us straight as we went through almost a year of training. A lot of different things. We did a lot of classroom work. We visit to contractor plants, NASA, installations, and even some rudimentary, I call it beginner exposure to geology field training. Near the end of this orientation training, each of us got an assignment. Might be a specialty like space suits, the boosters. It turned out Ed and I were both assigned to work for Jim McDevitt, whose crew was slated to fly the first lunar module and a test mission. Jim gave us some very simple marching orders. He said, "Get me a lunar module, they'll be ready to fly." That was it. With that guidance, Ed and I headed to Grumman, the plant on Long Island, New York, and we walked into I'll call it a storm of activity, like I had never witnessed or experienced in my life before. There were quite a number of lunar modules, about 5 of them, in work, in testing, or being manufactured at the time. LIM 2 was actually going to be the first manned flight, and we lost configuration on it at the point, jumped to LIM 3 to try to hold a schedule. There was enormous schedule pressure that was magnified by continual changes going on, a fight to reduce vehicle weight, and late delivery on subsystems. Grumman, between the lunar module test, we did a lot of runs in the FEMS engineering simulator and attended technical meetings. We sat many 16-hour days during that period. The workload increased after the Apollo 1 fire in December of '67, as there were a lot of spacecraft mods that were caused by that, mostly in the command module, but a lot of the wire harnessing was redone in the lunar modules. Test operations in 1967, to give you a feel for that, test operations ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for all but 1 day of that year. Christmas Day, test operation shut down. We were provided a trailer that had by the high bay in Plant 5, and it had a tunnel that we could enter the high bay area where the limbs were. That saved time getting in and out of our bunny suits and a clean room clothing. Our trailer contained a couple of double-deck bunks, bathroom, an office area with radios to keep track of test ops, and a small conference room. Often we didn't spend much time in the motels that we had every time we were up there. In a week we might only get as far as across the street to a deli called Vito's to get some food. Often in tests, and you have to remember this is front end, a lot of these tests we did were first time run. There were problems. Most of them I'd say were probably documentation errors just because it was a new test. But there could be operator error, or even we faced real problems. In each case, the test was halted. It was kind of treated like a crime scene. And you didn't want to mess with the configuration. Normally a meeting was held upstairs with test people and even design people to psych out what to do next and troubleshooting so you didn't damage the evidence in trying to figure out what really was wrong. If Ed and I figured out it was going to be a sharp stop, often we just lay down on the floor in the limb and say, call us when you're ready to go again. I figured we each had a couple of weeks of sleep time in the limb during that period. One of us was always at Grumman. We'd cycle back occasionally to revisit and get to know our families. We arranged it so we would overlap that visit back home, and generally we'd meet halfway at Dobbins at Marietta, Georgia, and debrief under the wing as the person heading back to Grumman to get kind of a run of what was priority on the list of either tests or meetings that were coming up that next week. Now, we each tried to get one-upsmanship. I'd say we competed, and I have to give Ed credit for the best. One day, casually, he wanted me to go over to another area of the plant where they were testing out this vehicle you would stand on, and supposedly kind of like a poor man's moped. And the thought was maybe eventually it would be used to maybe go around on the lunar surface. And Dad got on this thing, and he moved it around the room effortless, and I got on it, and after I fell off about 6 times, the operators and Ed all broke down laughing. Turned out Ed had spent a lot of hours over there getting his training down, setting it up for my visit. But at the end of that year, Ed was named as first member of the original 19 group assigned to a flight crew as a backup lunar module pilot for the Apollo 10 mission. Ed and I had been very competitive, and I have to say I was very envious of Ed beating me out for that first flight crew assignment. However, fate stepped in, and due to Mike Collins' medical problem, I was assigned as a backup lunar module pilot for the Apollo 8 mission with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Just as with the lunar module testing, experience and training was just as heavy, and invariably I trained on actually 4 missions, and always in the last month generally you were pretty much up to about 7 days a week in cycle getting ready. And unfortunately, everything we did in training wasn't where, for the most part, wasn't where we lived. The families lived in Houston, and our simulator training was mostly at Kennedy. If we were testing the real hardware, we were either at one of the manufacturing plants or at the Kennedy when they were brought here. And we did field geology wherever the outcrops were the right ones and exposed all over the country. So we very seldom, again, even in that phase, got to spend much time at home. After my mission on Apollo 13, which failed in its goal to land at Morrow, I volunteered to be a Capcom for Ed's Apollo 14 mission. Joining the gold team under Jerry Griffin, assured that I would be the Capcom on duty when Ed and Al did their second EVA, and tried an arduous climb up the flank of Cone Crater. Now it turned out with the slope they were having to go up, they couldn't do the bunny hop, which was less strenuous. They were having to do kind of a jogging, stepping, which in spacesuit it's hard, pressurized, and you're doing a lot of work. And eventually they got low in oxygen to the point of eating in the reserves. And I had to make several calls. I was asked to make several calls to ask him to get back. And at that time, Ed called me a fink. Ed and I joined up again as the backup crew for the Apollo 16 mission. I'd started that assignment with Bill Pogue and Jerry Carr, and with the hope of going back on Apollo 19, but 18 and 19 were canceled. And Deke Slayton elected to move Bill and Jerry off to the third Skylab mission to give them a ride. We were running out of seats. Ed and Stu Russa joined me to complete this deadhead backup assignment. Even though that was a longer time between the flights, the overall launch schedule had stretched out. Nevertheless, as you got close to flight again, the intensity was back there to feel you were really ready to do it, and really had to be ready to do it. As most of you know, on 13 we changed out a crewman 2.5 days before launch. During this training cycle, I could tell that Ed had his mind on the next challenge. I think that most of us who were lucky and privileged to be a part of the Apollo program had in our DNA a need to continue some effort to improve the future. Ed certainly did that using his lifelong experience and educational background to search for a lot of the rest of his life the secrets of the human mind to benefit mankind. I'd like to now ask Carlin to come back up for a moment. I'd like to present to you and for the family this flag, which got through TSA even without too much fuss. It's a flag that flew over Mission Control in Houston. And there's a note here from the Center Director with this flag that I offer.
Tammy